It's interesting how fast body trends change because not that long ago, the ideal was something completely different than what the people are starting to lean back into now. A few years ago, the look was very specific: fuller hips, smaller waist, a very exaggerated hourglass shape. And this was something people were actively building toward. Gym routines, cosmetic procedures, clothing choices, everything was centered around creating that silhouette. And now it doesn't feel like that same look is being pushed in the same way anymore. It didn't disappear completely, but it's not the center of attention that it used to be. What you're starting to see more of again is a leaner frame, smaller waistlines, less emphasis on extreme curves, more toned, more natural proportions. And it's not even being announced, it's just kind of happening in real time in the background. You notice it in how people are styling themselves before you even notice the body. Clothing got less tight in certain spaces, oversized started coming back more. Even in gym culture, the focus shifted in a noticeable way. It used to be very glute focused, very lower body intense training everywhere you looked online. Now you're seeing more balanced physiques being highlighted, more Pilates style training, more full body conditioning instead of just building one specific aesthetic. And when you really sit with the shift that's happening, just recognize this didn't come out of nowhere. This is a big part of just maintenance because the previous ideal wasn't just a look, it was a full time commitment. People don't always talk about what it actually takes to maintain that kind of body on a daily basis. It's not just the initial process, it's what comes after: the upkeep, the constant maintenance, the adjustments, the money, the time. Even something like gym culture reflects that. When a specific body type is trending, gym spaces start reflecting it. Training splits become very targeted, content starts focusing on very specific muscle groups, supplements, routines. Everything becomes specialized around achieving that one aesthetic. But over time, that level of intensity starts to feel less sustainable for a lot of people, and not just physically, but financially and mentally too. Gym memberships alone are one thing, but then you add in personal training, recovery work, cosmetic maintenance, dietary consistency, and it stops being casual. It becomes structured, and when people start feeling pressure in other areas of life, that level of structure and appearance starts to feel like too much to maintain long term. So, what naturally happens is people start leaning toward what feels more manageable: a leaner body, a more toned look, something that doesn't require as much external intervention to maintain. Something that aligns more with just living your normal life without everything revolving around upkeep. And that connects directly to something else that doesn't always get said out loud, which is how much the economy and lifestyle pressure influence beauty trends, even when people don't realize it. When things feel more expensive, when people are more cautious about spending, even subconsciously, aesthetic shift. People start prioritizing what feels sustainable, what doesn't require constant investment, what fits into their real life without needing a separate budget just for maintenance. That's part of why you start seeing simpler beauty routines again, too. Less heavy glam all the time, more skin focused care instead of heavy layering, more natural hairstyles being worn consistently. Not because one is better than the other, but because what people can realistically maintain always shows up in trends eventually. And body aesthetics follow the same pattern. What also is interesting is how the image of certain bodies starts to change depending on the cultural direction at the time. A leaner, more toned body doesn't just get seen as a physical thing. People attach meaning to it: discipline, control, consistency, having things together. Even when none of that is actually known about the person, that's the image that gets projected onto that body type. And that's where things start to get a little more layered because that perception doesn't just exist on its own in isolation, it tends to align with broader cultural shifts too. When there's a stronger push toward structure, order, traditional presentation, or even just more conservative coded values in society overall, the type of femininity that gets highlighted starts to reflect that. It becomes less about exaggerated expression and more about control, presentation, restraint. And you can see that reflected in aesthetics without anyone directly saying that. This is showing up in the kind of influencers that start getting more visibility. It shows up in the way certain bodies are framed online as clean or elevated or put together, while others are framed as overly done or excessive. It shows up in how quickly the language around bodies shifts, depending on what's being rewarded in that moment. Because that's what really drives most of this, even more than personal preference. Reward systems. What gets engagement? What gets brand deals? What gets replicated? What gets pushed by algorithms? People respond to what they see being consistently validated. So, when a certain body type starts getting more visibility again, even subtly, people start adjusting. Not always in this very obvious way, but sometimes it's just how they dress at first, or how they approach the gym, or what they start paying attention to in other people. And over time, those small adjustments accumulate into what looks like a full shift in preference. And it's gradual. Even the BBL era didn't happen overnight, it built over time. It became more visible, became more normalized, and then reached a peak where it felt like that was just the standard. And now you're seeing the reverse of that same pattern starting to happen again, but in a more quieter way. The interesting part is how quickly people adapt without always realizing they're adapting. Something that once felt like the standard starts to feel less central, and something else starts taking its place without a formal announcement. And it doesn't mean the previous standard disappears completely. It just stops being the dominant thing that defines the moment. What replaces it isn't always better or worse. It's just what fits the current environment more naturally. And right now, everything from the economy to social media aesthetics to cultural mood is aligning in a way that makes a more toned down, leaner, more controlled look feel like it fits more seamlessly into the direction things are going. Even the way people talk about fitness has changed. There's more emphasis on longevity now, on sustainability, on routines that people can actually stick to without burning out. And that mindset naturally influences how bodies are approached too, because when the focus shifts from intensity to consistency, the body that gets rewarded shifts with it. And people adjust accordingly. And not always deliberately, but consistently enough that over time it becomes obvious when you look back at how things used to be compared to how they are now. And that's really what body trends are. They're not just about preference, they're a reflection of what people are being exposed to, what's being rewarded, what's being normalized, and what fits the lifestyle of the moment. So when people say things like skinny is coming back or the aesthetic is changing, it's not just about appearance, it's tied into a lot more than that. It's lifestyle, economy, culture. It's what feels realistic to maintain in the environment people are actually living in. And that's why these shifts always cycle, because the environment always changes and people adjust to it whether they realize it or not. If you've noticed that shift too, not just in bodies, but in how people present themselves overall, I'd be interested in hearing what you've been seeing, because it tends to show up in a lot of different areas at the same time once you start paying attention to it. I am Nisi. Thank you so much for stopping by my channel. If you're not already a subscriber, please like, comment, share, and subscribe. And also let me know your input. Like, let me know how you see things trending and what your take on everything is. I'd love to know. Thank you and take care.